Losing time, I'm fading fast. I just wanna make it last. Try to let go of the past. I close my eyes, embrace the blast. Sleepless nights and headache stack. Restlessness to hell.
This is the Huawei Pura X Max Foldable 16GB plus 512GB Collector's Edition. In China, it sells for 12,999 yuan, around 1,420 pounds or $1,915. At that price, you could buy almost any foldable on the market. So why would anyone choose this one? Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before Huawei officially launched this phone, I joked with friends that if it started at 9,999 yuan, it would be an instant hit. Big thanks to my tech partner over in China for providing this footage. I really appreciate the support in making this video happen. Hey everyone, Stella here from techiestreet. If you're into staying updated with the newest gadgets, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our latest tech content. Then Huawei revealed the collector's edition price, 12,999 yuan. Yeah, that caught me off guard. Huawei fans probably understand the reasoning, but on launch day, plenty of buyers hesitated. I actually bought mine secondhand. It had only been activated for a few hours, and I got it for 12,100 yuan. At first, it felt like a great deal. Then I started wondering, why was someone selling it so quickly? When I asked the previous owner, he paused and simply said, "I got bored of it." After using the Pura X Max as my main phone for 2 weeks, I'm ready to share my honest experience. To keep things simple, I'll cover 2 strengths and 2 weaknesses, and explain why this is a fascinating piece of tech, but not necessarily the most practical daily driver. And before we start, if you're enjoying the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Now let's dive in. The first thing you'll notice is the screen ratio. Last year's Pura X had a chunky, compact design. This year, Huawei basically scaled it up. It loses a bit of that compact charm, but gains practicality. What's surprising is that a full year later, no Android brand has copied this design. Even now, it still feels unique. When watching 16:9 content on the outer display, it looks fantastic. The slim top and bottom bezels create an almost all-screen effect that's incredibly immersive. Yes, the shorter display means less vertical content fits on screen. You'll scroll a little more, but honestly, that's not a big deal. What you notice more is the extra width, and it makes everything feel bigger and more comfortable. Compared to last year's model, the Max feels much closer to a traditional large foldable. Videos, games, and even photography work surprisingly well on the outer screen. The content feels full, the experience feels satisfying. In fact, after switching back to a normal smartphone, it almost feels like holding a TV remote. But here's the question: how long does that fresh feeling last? Eventually, novelty wears off, and changing a screen ratio isn't exactly revolutionary anymore. Foldables already have unusual displays, and most people don't see that as innovation today. Ironically, because the outer display is so unique, the inner display feels less exciting when you unfold it. Inside, there's a 7.7-inch screen with an almost 16:9 shape. It feels like carrying a mini tablet in your pocket. Videos fill the display better, and games look more natural without the stretched appearance common on some foldables. Another nice touch is that both displays face the same direction. Switching between them feels seamless, and software optimization should, in theory, be easier. At least, in theory. We'll come back to that. One thing that genuinely impressed me was outdoor visibility. Both screens remain easy to see even under bright sunlight. Touch response, however, feels slightly sluggish. It seems more like HarmonyOS animation tuning than actual hardware lag. The factory screen protector is another weakness. It attracts fingerprints instantly and feels very soft. After only a few days, tiny dents had already appeared. Sadly, that's still a common foldable problem. As for the crease, it's decent, better than the X7, but not quite as refined as the N6. The hinge is also interesting. It feels completely different from devices like the Find N6 or Honor V6. The best way to describe it is unique. The good news, it closes firmly and feels secure. The bad news, using it in hover mode at different angles isn't very practical. Even so, the Pura X Max has undeniable charm. Its chunky design stands out immediately, especially in a market filled with phones that all look the same. But if we strip away the engineering complexity, what is it really? At its core, it's still a foldable phone with a different screen ratio, and the fact that such a small change creates so much discussion says a lot about the current smartphone industry. Honestly, I'm conflicted. The Pura X Max sits somewhere between a compact foldable and a large foldable, but its price is firmly in premium territory. Still, if Samsung or Apple eventually release foldables in similar size, Huawei may already have one important advantage: the cameras. Now, that advantage is relative. Think of the Pura X Max camera system as a slightly toned-down version of Huawei's flagship setup. Against large foldables, it's competitive. Against small foldables, it's hard to beat. Every camera supports 4K recording, the telephoto macro performance is solid, and you also get Huawei's variable aperture system. Does it matter every day? Maybe not, but it certainly sounds premium. At the same time, Huawei leaves out a few flagship features many Android brands now offer. There's no 8K video recording, no 4K 120 FPS slow motion. The Pura X and 90 Pro Max both miss these features too. Most users probably won't care, but competitors still use these specs to showcase their technology, so it's fair to question their absence. The front camera is fairly basic as well. There's no autofocus, video tops out at 4K 30 FPS, and cinematic portrait video is limited to 1080p 30 FPS. That's a little disappointing. Huawei's Pro mode feels less pro than you'd expect. Features like waveform monitoring, zebra patterns, focus peaking, advanced audio monitoring, and RF indicators are all missing. So what's the real standout feature? Wait, we're supposed to be praising the phone first, so let's give Huawei a little more credit before we get to that.
One area where Huawei really surprised me is the camera experience. The viewfinder feels smoother than both OPPO and Vivo, especially at night. What you see on screen is incredibly close to the final processed photo, making shooting feel much more natural. Looking at the camera layout, you'd expect zoom transitions to be a little messy, but Huawei software works some serious magic. Zooming between lenses feels almost seamless. Up close, it's not perfect, but overall, it's impressively smooth. HarmonyOS also shines inside third-party apps. Gaming, live streaming, switching lenses, everything feels polished. Live stream quality looks great. Frame rates stay stable, lens switching is quick. Even photos uploaded through WeChat get automatic optimization. Performance is right up there with Xiaomi. Huawei also added a new AI composition feature. The Pose Assistant has become especially popular on Xiaohongshu. To be fair, Vivo had something similar years ago, but Huawei pushed things further. The AI tries to understand what you like. It can recognize your gender, clothing, and even objects you're holding, then suggest poses while adjusting framing and focus automatically. It's genuinely interesting. The problem? Object recognition is still limited. It handles things like handbags or milk teacups well, but struggles with more complex items. And honestly, why do most of the generated examples look like blonde young guys? Looking at the overall camera system, Huawei proves you don't always need the strongest hardware. The image processing isn't overly aggressive, and stabilization is excellent. Distortion is noticeably lower than a certain 9 Ultra phone I recently tested. Of course, you also get the foldable camera tricks you'd expect. Hover shooting works well. The outer display can be used as a selfie monitor, and taking selfies with that little preview screen is surprisingly fun. It's obvious Huawei designed this as a point-and-shoot camera system. The goal is simple: help normal users take great photos without touching complicated pro settings. That's very different from the Android Ultra flagship philosophy. Which approach do you prefer? Now let's talk image quality. Compared with the Huawei Pura 90 Pro Max, daytime photos are remarkably similar. Detail, dynamic range, and overall quality are extremely close. The biggest difference is that the X Max has a slightly narrower field of view. Both phones use Huawei's signature color-focused imaging style, but when you compare them side by side, the colors can look surprisingly different. So which one is actually more accurate? At night, the color differences remain noticeable, but the gap in image quality is much smaller than you'd expect. The ultra-wide cameras are even closer. Day or night, it's honestly difficult to tell them apart. Telephoto is where the separation becomes a little clearer. Even then, at around 5x zoom in daylight, the difference isn't huge. Beyond 10x, a foldable starts falling behind, but at night, that gap shrinks again. Looking at wall textures around 10x zoom, they can appear almost identical. Both phones also perform extremely well in telephoto macro photography. As for 100x zoom, I'll let you decide which looks better. Video recording tells a similar story. Daytime footage is nearly impossible to distinguish. At night, the X Max sometimes looks slightly better, showing a bit more detail and cleaner results. Telephoto video differences exist, but they're far from dramatic. For selfies, the Huawei Pura 90 Pro Max offers a wider default angle, but the X Max wins overall. Thanks to the outer display preview, you can frame shots more accurately and even switch to the ultra-wide camera while shooting. The result is a noticeably stronger selfie experience. And honestly, this sums up modern smartphone photography. These are flagship phones, triple cameras, around 7x zoom, telephoto macro. For most people, the differences are incredibly difficult to spot in everyday use, especially when comparing two devices from the same brand. Huawei's foldable flagship and camera flagship are basically competing against each other. You could argue the X Max has the better camera system. You could also argue the 90 Pro Max is still stronger. And 200 megapixel marketing? Come on, let's be serious. Now, enough compliments. It's time for the criticisms. And here's the interesting part. The phone's biggest strength is also its biggest weakness. That ultra-wide outer display looks fantastic. It's immersive, unique, and instantly stands out. But it also creates an awkward hand feel. For two-handed typing, it's excellent, comfortable, spacious, easy to use. For one-handed use, exactly as challenging as you'd imagine. And I know some people will say, just use two hands, but real life doesn't work that way. You're riding a bike, holding a subway rail, carrying shopping bags, eating while scrolling. Those are the moments when one-handed use matters, and that's where this phone can become frustrating. Back in the BlackBerry Passport era, people weren't glued to their phones like they are today. And if you accidentally drop this thing, the repair bill alone could buy another flagship phone. After about 10 days, I honestly felt like my finger strength, coordination, and patience had all improved. Then there's the weight. That makes things even tougher. It's roughly as heavy as the X7 and slightly heavier than the N6. Compared to the V6 foldable, it's about 10 grams heavier. You can call that premium, you can call it solid, but your arm definitely notices, and so does your pocket. I also wonder how many foldable owners actually go caseless. I'm definitely not one of them. I need a magnetic closing case, so that's what I've been using. Unfortunately, adding a case makes the phone even wider and heavier. My current case also includes a front frame, and honestly, it's terrible. First, it adds thickness and feels cheap. Second, because the edge gesture area is already narrow, that extra frame makes swipe gestures almost unusable. I eventually gave up and switched back to classic 3-button navigation. Finding a good foldable case is honestly a nightmare. If you found one, let me know in the comments. I genuinely need recommendations. Thickness is another issue. After using ultra-thin foldables like the N6, picking up the X Max again feels surprisingly old school. Still, maybe that extra thickness would be easier to forgive if battery life were amazing. But that's where things get complicated. The phone has a 5300 mAh battery. Sounds good on paper. In reality, battery anxiety still creeps in. Lately, I've mostly used the outer display and barely played games. Even then, I'm averaging around 6 hours of screen on time. Start using the inner display outdoors for maps or video playback, and the battery drains noticeably faster. Overall, battery life is better than Samsung's foldables, but compared to most of the competition, it's still behind. Now here's where things start getting interesting. Huawei spent a lot of time promoting landscape apps and split-screen multitasking during launch. But after actually using the phone, I found myself opening the inner display far more often. Outside of videos and gaming, landscape mode simply never became part of my daily routine. Part of the reason is that Huawei's parallel world feature can run certain apps side by side, which is useful. But when major apps like QQ and WeChat still don't properly support landscape mode, the whole experience loses a lot of its appeal. And then there are the Zhuoyi-Tongue apps. Many still feel unfinished. Some just stretch into oversized, large font poster layouts. Others force full screen input with no option to change the display style. And I already know what some people are thinking. Why not just use the native HarmonyOS apps? We'll get there. To be fair, HarmonyOS itself has matured a lot. The system is smooth, animations look polished, background app management is stable. The operating system isn't the problem anymore. Third-party app support is. And honestly, that's still the Pura X Max's biggest weakness. Lately, every time I discover a missing feature or compatibility issue, I've been writing it down. It's been less than 2 weeks. That list keeps getting longer. For example, the HarmonyOS version of Bilibili is missing the Creator Center. Comments don't work properly, there's no screen lock while watching videos. Even two-finger zoom isn't supported. Meanwhile, the Li Auto app keeps getting killed in the background even when locked, and Xiaomi's car app doesn't even have a native HarmonyOS version. WeChat has its own problems too. Sometimes incoming calls simply won't answer. Voice to text feels unfinished, with no transition animation and no automatic continuation. You have to tap every message manually. One-tap QR code saving is missing as well. Many WeChat mini programs behave strangely too. On the outer display, layouts often feel incomplete. On the inner display, they can look stretched and awkward. QQ isn't much better. You still can't properly @mention people in group chats. Wallet support exists, but it's limited. TikTok finally supports the wallet feature, which is nice, but likes and follower notifications still don't display correctly on the homepage. Even Baidu Tieba can't properly download original images. Then there are wearable apps. Outside Huawei's own ecosystem, things get messy fast. Apps installed through Zhuoyi-Tongue frequently disconnect in the background even after enabling every battery permission possible. And Zhuoyi-Tongue doesn't even support WeChat login. My old Xiaomi smartwatch, basically unusable now, which means if you're using HarmonyOS, you're almost pushed toward Huawei wearables. Speaking of Zhuoyi-Tongue, nearly every app installed through it comes with compromises. Games, video apps, utility apps, all of them. Take Bilibili. I ended up installing 2 versions, the HarmonyOS version for watching videos, the Zhuoyi-Tongue version for comments and posting. And when I share a video from Zhuoyi-Tongue into QQ, it generates a special Zhuoyi-Tongue link. It just feels messy. Even basic sensors don't always behave correctly. Gravity sensing often creates a blurry floating effect that genuinely makes me feel dizzy. App layouts aren't great either. In many cases, it reminds me of poorly optimized foldable apps on Samsung devices. Then there's display switching. Most large Zhuoyi-Tongue apps, especially games, can't smoothly move between the outer and inner screens. They usually restart or close completely. And because Zhuoyi-Tongue is essentially an emulator layer, optimization will always have limits. That's especially obvious in gaming. Modern games already demand a lot from the hardware. Running them through Zhuoyi-Tongue makes things even tougher. Even native HarmonyOS titles like Genshin Impact still run into limitations from the 9030 Pro chip. Performance and thermal control both take a hit. There's still a noticeable gap compared to Android flagship phones. But honestly, if you're buying a Huawei Foldable, gaming probably isn't your top priority anyway. Then there's app availability. Many Android apps don't even appear in the Zhuoyi-Tongue recommendations. It's like they don't exist. Some international apps can only be found through Huawei's curated list. Anything less mainstream becomes difficult or impossible to find. And personally, having to connect my upgraded Google account through a third-party bridge app doesn't feel comfortable. That leads directly into privacy and security concerns. Without official Google framework support, there are obvious limitations. No Google Wallet, no Google authentication apps, no paid Play Store apps. And some banking apps install successfully but fail during login or verification because the required Google security services aren't available. So if you travel internationally on a regular basis, I'd honestly say skip this phone. It's simply not worth the headache. And there's one more thing. Right now, most brands are focused on matching Apple's ecosystem integration. Huawei has responded with HarmonyOS Core Interconnect. To be fair, it's actually pretty good. Transfer speeds are fast, stability is solid. Huawei deserves credit there. But compatibility remains complicated. Apple's migration tool inside the HarmonyOS store still relies on Zhuoyi. Samsung's solution comes through a third-party platform. Even major global brands still lack fully native support. Thankfully, most Chinese Android brands already offer migration tools, making it relatively easy to switch into Huawei. Switching out? That's another story. No matter which brand you move to, apps don't transfer properly. You'll likely end up reinstalling everything from scratch. And that's the bigger issue. Third-party software support on HarmonyOS still feels limited. In fact, before you even start using the phone, setup can feel confusing because you're dealing with multiple download sources at once. The App Store, HarmonyOS Store, Zhuoyi, and more. Honestly, I don't know how many buyers fully understand what they're signing up for. Even native HarmonyOS apps aren't always perfect. Yes, this is a foldable. Yes, it looks like it should be optimized for large screens, but the moment you enter deeper menus, those oversized fonts and poster-style interfaces often return. So if your phone use is mostly social media, messaging, videos, and casual browsing, and you don't mind the large font design, HarmonyOS on this foldable is perfectly usable. But if your workflow depends on specific apps, specialized tools, or anything beyond basic everyday tasks, I'd still recommend Android or Apple. And before the comment section says it, I'll say it myself. This isn't entirely Huawei's fault. A lot of these problems come from third-party developers. And yes, my phone usage is probably heavier than most people's. That's completely fair. In fact, I'm actually optimistic about HarmonyOS. When the native WeChat version first launched, it couldn't even do location sharing. Now, most basic functions work, and that progress happened in just over a year. On top of that, Huawei's growing market share and more affordable devices like the Huawei Chongqiang 9.0 could encourage developers to support HarmonyOS much faster. So the future looks promising. The foundation is there, the progress is real, it's just not quite there yet.
So after everything, here's my final verdict. If we're talking purely about user experience, the Pura X Max doesn't feel like the revolutionary game changer some people claim it is. Looking at it objectively, it's actually difficult to say it's clearly better than the X7. But there's something interesting I can't ignore. Lately, every time I pull this phone out in public, whether I'm scanning a QR code, adding someone on social media, or sharing a photo, people notice a lot. And the question almost always comes first. Wow, what phone is that? Followed immediately by, wait, is that Huawei's new foldable? Now, if you're someone who loves tech, gadgets, and talking about phones, that reaction has real value. And honestly, that's hard to measure on a spec sheet. I'll admit I probably have a slight double standard when it comes to Huawei products, but it's not because of the brand itself. It's because Huawei keeps doing things nobody else is willing to try. From variable aperture cameras, to dual telephoto experiments, to this unusual widescreen foldable, Huawei keeps releasing products that feel different, bold, and sometimes even a little crazy. You could say the Pura series introduces a new idea every year, or you could say Huawei just keeps making new toys for tech enthusiasts. Either way, people pay attention, and that's something the smartphone industry desperately needs right now. A lot of people blame the industry's slowdown on the economy or rising component costs,
But then you look at what's actually happening. The Xiaomi 17 Pro Max sold incredibly well, largely because of its unique rear display. The Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra introduced fresh display concepts and achieved record sales. Even Vivo's unusual 400mm telephoto setup is still selling at premium prices in the used market. And now we have the Pura X Max. The pricing is aggressive, some would say excessive, yet it still seems to be selling surprisingly well. And that tells us something important. An imperfect product with a fresh idea is often more exciting than a perfect product with nothing new. We've seen plenty of devices fail recently. Some of them deserve to. So I don't think the economy alone is the problem anymore. Consumers are still willing to spend money. They just want something interesting. But as always, our channel comes back to one simple question. Is it worth it? And honestly, that depends entirely on who you are. This is a very selective phone. If you're looking for a practical device to use comfortably for years, I'd think carefully before buying it, because the excitement of the unique screen ratio will eventually fade. The awkward one-handed use, the average battery life, the performance limitations, HarmonyOS compatibility issues, the fragile, foldable design, and the potentially expensive repairs. Those problems aren't disappearing anytime soon. And if we're talking about long-term ownership, more traditional foldables like the Huawei X7 still feel more mature and complete. But if you're a phone enthusiast, if you love unique designs, if practicality isn't your top priority, or if you've watched this entire review, including all my software complaints, and still don't care, maybe you're even watching this right now disagreeing with everything I've said and preparing a comment below. Then congratulations, you'll probably love the Pura X Max. And honestly, that leaves me with one final thought. Wouldn't it be even more fun if Huawei released a smaller and cheaper Pura X2? And while we're dreaming, maybe someone in the Android world should copy this idea too. I'm looking at you, Honor. Anyway, that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed this review or found it helpful, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more tech content. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!
Losing time, I'm fading fast. I just wanna make it last. Try to let go of the past. I close my eyes, embrace the blast. Sleepless nights and headache stack. Restlessness to hell and back. What's my purpose? What do I grab? A slippery surface, a heart attack. And sometimes